a Grammy redo as part of the Grammy redo series. This one's from 1989,
Mm-hmm.
which was originally George Michael's Faith, I believe, was the one that actually won that year.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So generally speaking, I think what we're going to do for the series is that you're going to pick. We're going to like look at the one that actually won, and then I'm going to pick what I think should have won, and you're going to pick what you think should have won, and we're going to discuss it. Is that more or less how this is going to go down?
I hear though.
Say again. Looks like he's frozen here. We are going to have to work out a different workflow of this, I think.
We are, for some reason, it's playing in my background. Like after we talk, it's coming.
Was echoing? Is it
Yeah.
those of you who are in the hey CJ, what's up, man? Is it echoing for you too? Like those of you who are here listening to us? Because it's not echoing on my end, but
It's not echoing the people.
yeah, Coop does sound muffled. So what he's hearing is what I'm hearing, which is you sound like this a little bit, but I don't know that's anything you're doing. It's just CJ. Thanks for being patient with our technical difficulties. We appreciate you, and thanks for hanging out.
Let me jump out.
Okay. We will get this right at some point. He's going to jump out and come back, and we'll get into this soon. I don't know if you got to listen, CJ. I don't know if you got to listen to any of our like previous episodes or whatever. We're doing this series where we're talking about all of the Grammy votes for starting in 1988, I believe was the first one we did. It's fine, man. You do whatever you need to do, especially if you're on the train or whatever. I mean, I'm sure that you're going to have more connection issues than we are. So, Coop's back. Looks like.
Yeah, I think we should be good
Yeah,
now.
that sounds good now. That sounds normal.
Yeah, that's what
CJ's hanging out with us. He says he's on the train though, so he may cut in and out. So
okay.
that's all.
Good. Make sure everybody click like and subscribe to the page when you see this and when you hear this. We're actually doing something pretty fun. It's crazy all the different ways and approaches that we've had to approach a lot of these shows. We've compared and songs and albums, and I actually think this is kind of fun to do some Grammy redo stuff.
Yeah. It's just a fun thing to do. Like I put a poll up the other a week or so ago before we did the first one, and asked whether it was the people thought it was a good idea or the people thought it was like an old man yelling at clouds thing, and almost everybody said that it was a pretty good idea. So I think it's fun. I mean, if we're going to talk about, especially if we're going to talk about it on According to Hip Hop, especially, and in many different communities, actually, like that, the Grammys are maybe not racist is not exactly the right word, but are biased for sure. Then I think it's a worthwhile exercise to like talk through what it actually should look like then.
There's some systemic biases going on for sure. I don't know if racism is the word,
but yeah, they absolutely are biased for sure.
Yes, the bias, like I said, the bias tends to fall in line with the demographics
mm-hmm.
and the numbers, which speaks to some systemic issues. I just don't know if racism is the appropriate. Yeah.
I've while I've been sitting at school, while I've in between grading papers and stuff like that, I've kind of looked through the list between now and like 2000 ish, and like thought about like which ones I think should be the best from those years.
Hmm.
And that's like 13 years, I believe. And I think they got four of course. If you count Joshua Tree as being right, that's four. I think they got right, which is a pretty low percentage, less than a third. So, um, and the ones that I think should be correct, um, there's only two of them. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, that should be correct. Or that are like no doubt, whatever ones. But because Jagged Little Pill won and Miseducation won, and both of those are like
I'm okay with that.
yeah, there's not when you hear the name of the record, it's like Thriller winning, right? I mean, is that like when you hear the
Yeah.
name of the record, and you're like, yeah, of course that one. Like it's not
Right.
you don't even have to hear the rest of the ones that came out that year to know that one. Like it's um anyway. So today's is from 1989, which is at least from what I have examined and listened through, kind of a lower year, like a not as great a year, at least on this side of the coin. Um, and we're going to talk about INXS's album Kick and Public Enemy's It Takes a Nation of Millions.
It was a light year. It appears to be everywhere except for rap.
Yeah, in the rap world, there were like 15, not 15, but a bunch that were like, oh,
No, you're right. It's close to 15. Like, for a lot of people, 1988 is the best rap year ever. Um,
and when I looked at that list, I was like, yeah, I can see that.
1988. I think the years people bring up when they talk about like the greatest hip hop years ever is they talk about 1988, 1995, and 96
Hmm.
are probably the 3 years that get frequented the most. I think 96 might be the best rap year, but for those people who feel like 1988 is the best rap year, I feel like 1996 has a lot of albums that grew into classics over time.
Okay,
1988 has albums that were classic from the moment that you heard them.
okay.
So I feel like the quality on 96 is a little bit deeper, but I don't know if it's as strong classic wise in terms of how it's upheld itself over time.
Okay.
Um, Most people who are familiar with Public Enemies, It Takes a Nation. How about this? Before Dr. Dre made The Chronic and before Nas made Illmatic, this was clearly to most people the best rap album of all time.
Hmm. I can hear that listening to. This is the first time, and if I've ever listened to the thing the whole way through. I mean, I've heard many of the songs, obviously, but like listening to it from beginning to end. If I've ever done that, it's been 20 years probably. It's been a long, long time, and like I can hear that in there.
Yeah,
It's there are lots of albums, and that's one of the mental hurdles that I've had to go through, like considering like what to pick for different things, is that there are plenty of albums that have one incandescent hit and some pretty good stuff. And this one, it's really hard to find one that have incandescent hits and are really solid all the way through as well. So, and
it's
this is one of those.
it's a truly masterful piece of work, Andrew. Um,
Yeah.
for people who feel like it's the greatest rap album of all time, I don't argue with them.
No,
And
no,
I
I can absolutely see that.
feel that way. Um, and if it's not the best rap album ever, it's the most important rap album ever.
I can
But
hear that too.
the first of all, Chuck D used to be a radio DJ in college.
Mm,
So the voice is made for TV, radio,
yeah,
film,
yeah,
you name it. One of the best voices ever. But the socio-economic and political commentary on this album, quite frankly, is second to none, and nobody's even come close.
right.
Nobody's even come close to the rhetoric that's on this album. And this album, quite frankly, is frightening to white America. There's a lot of pro-black nationalistic
Yeah,
talk. Like this album's more dangerous than Straight Outta Compton. Like people looked at like NWA like they were dangerous. No, no, no. Public Enemy is dangerous.
Yeah, and Straight Outta Compton was this year too. I mean, speaking of the list of albums that was one of them that was
Well,
this year.
let me run down the other because
Yeah,
here's
I talked about it at the end of the last show. Run it down for us again though.
here's how
It's a
here's how
nuts list.
here's how great this album is because it trumps these other albums, and these are all classic albums I'm about to name. The
Mhm.
Greatest Adventures of Slick Rick, which I also feel is one of the greatest rap albums
Yeah,
of all. Strictly Business by EPMD, which is a classic. Long Live the Kane by Big Daddy Kane, which has Ain't No Half Steppin' and Raw on it. Classic. By All Means Necessary by Boogie Down Productions. Another classic. Critical Beatdown, Ultramagnetic MCs. Another classic. Follow the Leader by Eric B. and Rakim. Another classic. Easy Does It by Easy E. Another classic. Straight Outta Compton by NWA. Another classic. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff in here like Salt and Pepper's first album, Assault with a Deadly Pepper, Run DMC's Tougher Than Leather, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Print, he's the DJ, I'm the rapper. Too Short's debut, Life is Too Short. Straight Out the Jungle Brothers debut, which pretty much started the whole Native Tongues thing for Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, and all the groups that would follow. Light as a Rock by MC Light. It's everywhere. There's literally great rap albums
that
everywhere,
was
man.
14 you just listed,
I told you.
and you didn't list. It's a nation. It takes a nation of millions too.
I
That's
told
50.
you that 15
Yeah.
about when you were like 15. I was like, no, it's about 15.
That that's a deep list. For those of
And
you
so
who are, if anybody's watching this, that's kind of a younger folks and don't know much about that kind of history. That's a deep list.
a deep list full of classic albums, and this is the album that trumps them all. Like
Hmm.
this until 1995 and 96 was easily Rat's heaviest year, and this album, and as much as I love Slick Rick and I love Rakim and I love KRS-One, this album is a step ahead of all of their albums
Hmm.
because I think the hardest thing to do in music is to have a message and make people want to party still.
Yeah, like I was listening to this morning, and I got to the end, which is the reversal of the Beastie Boys song, the "Party
Glad
for
you
Your Fight" or whatever it is. And I was standing there dancing in the fucking kitchen, like to that, and it's I love, yeah, and Biz Markie too. One Gifted says too. That was also that year. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean that's it's a serious list.
seriously deep year. You're right. First of all, the Public Enemy, much like the Beastie Boys, were signed to Def Jam,
Hmm.
and Rick Rubin took part in putting this album together too. It's mostly done by the Bomb Squad,
Yeah.
Hank and Keith Shockley,
Mhm.
who, quite frankly, is who Dr. Dre patterned his style after. That's how important
Wow.
like Enemy is production wise. If you go listen, and Mike D has said this on According to Hip Hop, if you actually go listen to the production on Straight Outta Compton, it sounds like Public Enemy's production from Yo
Hmm.
Bum Rush the Show, which was their album that they came out with in '87, their debut album. And Yo Bum Rush the Show is very unapologetically black, like it takes a nation of millions.
Hmm.
But you have to understand too, these guys are on Def Jam. LL Cool J is going platinum. Run
Right.
DMC is going multi platinum. The Beastie Boys are going multi platinum. They're around a bunch of quote unquote stars, and so this Daniel Johnson has a 9.99 super chat for us.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, brother. Um, Public Enemy was kind of like fuck all that. Like
Yeah.
their first album didn't even go gold. Yo Bum Rush the Show didn't even go gold initially. So Def Jam kind of took a risk in signing these guys,
Mm.
financially speaking, just because of the
Right.
artists that they had on their roster. But it was such a movement.
Hmm.
And it was so powerful. The message was so powerful, it couldn't be denied. And also, too, and this is what I mean is frightening to white America. Chuck D's talking about Farrakhan in 1988
Yeah.
with Frequency.
Yeah. And
You
Garvey. I mean, he's talking about it's a whole thing. Yeah.
Well, that's why I brought up the black nationalist part because
Yeah.
there's a Marcus Garvey talk on here,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, and it has
He
the
quotes it directly, repeatedly.
yes, and it has some rage to it that speaks to shades of Nat Turner.
Yeah.
It's a little dangerous in the sense that it's almost like, well, how about this on Straight Outta Compton? NWA is dangerous, but they're more dangerous to their own community. It
Mm.
takes a nation. is dangerous to white people and
Hmm.
empowering for black people, which is
Right.
part of the danger in it.
The empowering part is, yeah, the
Yeah,
difference.
the empowering part is the big difference, and it's the dangerous part if you're a white American and you're listening to this album in the late '80s, and people don't understand this, and I and I hate bringing this up, but it just needs to be said. We've been enslaved in this country still longer than we've been free.
By a long shot.
It's not even
If
questionable.
we're being real, like it's, yeah,
Yeah, it's not. It's like
what,
so.
three times as long or four? I mean, it's
I mean,
considerably longer.
they say the first slave trade boat landed here around 1619.
Hmm.
So if you go 1619 to 1865, you have about 150 years.
Yeah.
And then you go through Reconstruction, which quite frankly is the first form of institutional slavery and racism created,
Yeah.
and that lasted about another 35, 40 years. So you're almost 200 years in, and then there's segregation and Jim Crow and the lynching and bombing of towns and people. So we just got the chance to vote in 1965. That's not a long time ago.
No, it
So
is
think
not.
about this album isn't even 30 years removed from us not having any rights.
Yeah.
So the people who
That
raised
would have been their parents and their like all, yeah, all of those people. Yeah.
and no album encompasses the break the chains manifesto of that in any genre of music better than this album. It's
Right.
very much breaking the psychological and physical, chains, and it was very inspiring, but it was very frightening to white America as a whole. You know what I
I,
mean?
yeah, I just looked it up. Chuck D was born in 1960, so he would have been born before black people had the right to vote. I
You're
mean,
not being funny. He's around our parents' age.
yeah,
I'm not sure how old your parents are, but it's like that's around the time my
he's a
mom
little
was.
bit younger than him, but not by much. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a little bit older than my mom, but not by much.
Mm.
So he's a product. You can tell he's a product of that environment.
Right.
That his parents didn't have rights growing up.
Right.
Yeah, and you can. That's what I mean. It's that nobody's ever channeled their anger about the system better on the album either. And also too, it it literally discusses every single issue that was affecting the black community at the time and still today.
Hmm.
Uh,
That's one of the things that shocked me actually listening to. Not shocked me because I obviously know how the world is, but it how fresh a lot of it sounded. Like how much of what he's talking about you could place in 2024 and it would be just as prescient. Like you hear that actually we talk about in like the in this community like REM's Green and Document. Those albums would have been 87 and 89. Um
oh,
and they
Great
and
State.
they have many of the same kind of political kind of crap, not crap, but political commentary too. Um like anti-Reagan, anti that kind of thing. And um that also is works just as well today as it did in late 80s.
Yeah, Chuck D is a teacher on this album because he's
Yeah.
the simple information. First of all, he's college educated, and that's not the knock other rappers at the time, but rap was still very much an entertainment and bravado sport.
Hmm.
Chuck's entertainment was the commentary, and that's
Yeah.
what I mean. It's hard to make commentary like that entertaining.
It's a
Um,
tough line to walk, man.
it is. This is there's a story once when Tupac was um on tour with Digital Underground. This is Tupac before he became Tupac when he's just a backup dancer.
Yeah.
And he went and spit some rhymes for Chuck D, and Chuck D liked the rhymes, and that's one of the things that inspired Pac to keep going in rap and to also have a message to his music. That's how
Right.
influential Chuck D is. He influenced Tupac, who was
Wow.
in this
So
culture.
genealogy, and then you said the Bomb Squad influenced Dre too. So it's like the is this one step back in the genealogy before, not that rap wasn't a huge thing in 1988, but before it did the Chronic Doggy Style, which is the whole
Yeah,
where it took off into the stratosphere.
correct. This it addresses Reagan, the crack and cocaine epidemic, um, heavily.
Yep.
There's a song on there called Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos. It's
Hmm.
one of rap's best stories ever.
Yeah.
And it's literally explaining the process of what happens to a man in the prison industrial complex in America
Hmm. In
in
1980, mind you.
1988.
Yeah.
And Chuck is just magnificent on this album, Andrew. Like,
Yeah. His lyricism is extraordinary. I remember you told me when if you guys are new to the channel and don't know this, our very first episode that we ever did 2.5 years ago was about Public Enemy, Fight the Power, and Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind, which are two of the most important protest songs that have ever been made. And um, and you told me then that Chuck D modeled himself in part after Dylan. Like he wanted to do that kind of lyricism and social commentary at the same time. And this
yes.
is another example of that.
Yeah, so think about this. This is who Chuck D is. He's actually the author of he's the author of the best rap song ever, in my opinion, Invite the
Mhm.
Power.
Howard, yeah.
He's the author of the most important rap album ever, which is the album we're discussing.
Hmm.
And this album is in conversation for best rap album ever. It's
Right.
definitely the most important, but it's also in conversation for best.
Yeah. It's solid all the way through. Like
Production is phenomenal. The production
like
on here,
so many of these albums on both sides every that I'm listening to because I have lots of holes in my musical education in the late '80s. That's because that was before I was fully realized as a like music listener, right? Because that's would have started like early '90s mostly for me. Um, and I'm realizing that many of them have one, two good songs on them, and the rest of them are kind of not filler exactly, but they're not as strong. And this one's strong like all the way through. I looked at that track list, and like I am not a Public Enemy knower very much. Like I don't know a ton about it. I mean, which is part of the reason why we're doing this, so you can teach me. But it's I was like, I recognize like 10 of those songs names, like without having like dug deep into Public Enemy's whatever history. Yeah.
no, like people know these songs. Like it's one of those albums that you've heard these songs playing in a lot of black movies and a lot of hip hop oriented movies, and not even realize it if you're not familiar with them that that's what you're listening to. Like, yeah, like a lot of these songs, like a lot of them.
Hmm.
And what's
Great.
crazy is that their two best songs to me
Hmm.
aren't even on this album, and that's "Welcome to the Terror Dome" and "Fight the Power."
Right.
Come on the subsequent album, "Fear of a Black Planet."
Hmm.
But these guys are it. I wanted to hear some of your notes and some of your thoughts about.
Um, like Bring the Noise has been one of my favorite songs from this record for forever and ever and ever. Like
Yes.
that's like I
Oh,
haven't listened to it in a while, and
oh,
I'd forgotten that it was on this album, and I was listening to it while I was making breakfast again this morning, and yeah, I was listening to it like without looking at the track list or whatever, just kind of listening as it went. And I was like, oh, that one, like I recognize that one immediately, immediately. Um,
this album is inspired by Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On" too. That needs to be stated, and I think that's kind of obvious. You can see the connective tissue between what's going on in this album. This is hip hop's version of what's going on.
it's not dissimilar from what we were talking about last week with Sign of the Times too. It is doing similar kinds of things. It's actually, if you want to go down that road a little bit, um, both of these albums that we're talking about today, INXS's Kick and It Takes a Nation of Millions, both are picking up on Prince's Sign of the Times, but in totally different ways. Sonically, it's INXS's album. I think INXS is one of the people Prince was pulling from or saying I can do this better than on Sign of the Times. Um, so sonically it's very similar in some ways to that album, and message wise it's very similar to It Takes a Nation of Millions. So like it that and which has a lineage that goes back to Marvin and What's Going On, right? So it's interesting. One of the most interesting parts of this project to me are being able to trace the lineage of things more easily, and more readily, and being able to hear like what things connect to other stuff, and
Mhm.
it's just fascinating to me.
Um, like you said, this song is filled with classic songs: "Prophets of Rage," "Rebel Without a Pause," "Black Steel," "In the Hour of Chaos," "Night of the Living Bassheads."
Hmm.
Like, I don't think a song sums up what happens in the black community with the crack cocaine era better than that record. You
Yeah.
know, like it's something that's frequently mentioned by the 90s artists who are a little bit younger,
Hmm.
but none of the other artists are talking about the crack cocaine epidemic in rap, which I find to be frightening. I think KRS-One maybe a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
KRS-One and Chuck D have been hip hop's like social commentary,
They're the
conscious.
professors, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Some Shogun status comes with it. You know what I mean?
Mm,
It's like
yeah.
going to see the wise old man on the hill. Um, but these songs are just they're just timeless. Like she watched Channel Zero,
Hmm.
Terminator X to the Edge of Panic, Cold Lamping with Flavor, Don't Believe the Hype,
Yeah. That's
Bring
another
the
thing
Noise.
about as I listened to it first, I was like, oh yeah, I know that one too. Like,
Yeah, you know all these songs some sort of way. It is one of those rap albums that has. It's kind of funny. You don't expect a rap album like this to penetrate popular culture.
hmm,
But the music's so fucking good, it's hard not to.
it's like
And it's
it's one
cinematic, big. The production is big and it's
of those-
cinematic. It's made for movies.
it is like the Born Gifted said that. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
too.
it is. It's made for movies. And watching these videos was like watching a movie.
Hmm.
Like if you were a kid and you watched this stuff, like if you watched Black Steel and Hour of Chaos and Bring the Noise, and especially Night of Living Bassheads, there was something about it. Even the look was different than what everybody else was doing in rap. So they like when I mean they took all the risk. I mean they took risk within their own genre.
Hmm.
They took risks, you know, within another community, the larger white demographic. I mean, like this is one of those no risk, no reward moments. It's like, oh no, they took all the risk and they reaped all the rewards from all the risks that
Right.
they. And mostly that's Chuck D trusting himself as an artist and what he was saying. But never before has revolutionary music been so damn funky for us as black
Yeah.
people in the hip hop community. Because this wasn't like make you sit down and think. Like you're nodding your head. You're
Hmm.
wanting to dance while he's saying these things.
Even I wanted to dance while I was listening to it. Yeah. Like, and I think that's one of the reasons that the white community found it so dangerous, other than his rhetoric, is that it's kind of an inception thing too, right? Because you can play this in the club, or you can play it as you're driving, or you can play it whatever, and you can dance to it without like paying attention at all to what he's saying, and
Yeah.
because the grooves are so amazing, and so it's kind of sliding in those messages in a way that I would imagine that adults in 1988 would not necessarily have been comfortable with.
The Bomb Squad doesn't get enough credit as a production team. This is who produced Ice Cube's first album, America's Most Wanted, when he left
Okay.
NWA. So think about this. This is how you know the Dre influence is real. When Ice Cube left, he went to the people that he knew inspired
Hmm.
Dr. Dre, whose beats he was rapping over. So for Ice Cube, that was an easy transition because he's like, oh, well, Dre's already been doing beats like these guys for, you know, in
Right.
a lot of ways, he's already used to rapping over their beats.
Hmm.
And
Right.
they don't get enough credit for creating because I mean Chuck is such a powerful force and figure. The production is what makes this album palatable.
Yeah.
It's definitely not the commentary.
No, it is not.
And so the Bomb Squad doesn't get enough credit as a production team for like doing a I mean, it's just orchestrated brilliantly. The engineering is great and ahead of its time. The sounds, what's good there? The sounds are very like this is the James Brown part of hip hop.
Hmm.
The James Brown portion of hip hop. I tell people where it's
There's
like,
funk. Yeah.
yeah. So the funk and the drums that you're hearing, no, those really are James Brown samples that they took.
Oh, they are. Okay.
On some of them, yes. So like literally, forget which record it is. I think one of these records samples the Funky Drummer actually,
Okay.
which also got sampled by Eric B and Rakim on Lyrics of Fury in the same year. So the James Brown influence is heavy, and also to understand a lot of these albums are being made next door to each other, and Public Enemy is the one that's inspiring people to do their shit. Like Eric B and Rakim, they're recording not okay. So Eric B and Rakim's from Long Island. So is Chuck D and Public Enemy. Everybody's down with Def Jam or around Def Jam at the time.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, no, Eric B and Rakim are hearing It Takes a Nation being made. Slick Rick is signed to Def Jam just like Public Enemy. They're hearing this album get made, and everybody's like, that's that behind the scenes talk. Is that all the other legends are like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like what they're doing. We got to go back in the lab.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So this is one of those albums that made people go back and try harder. Like as far as competitively speaking for their peers. Yeah.
But also makes it important, not just in its commentary way, but like in the history of music way, that it's pumping up and it's making other people
Like
bring their best too.
I'm about to say it was influential in the process of it being made, inspiring other people to make some of their best stuff.
Obviously, it did. I mean, you just listed out, the list of albums that were made that year. That's
Yeah.
yeah,
Like for people that were hearing them make this, they were like, what the fuck? You know? Because nobody's talking like this. And even though KRS One had started to talk like this. So Boogie Down Productions' first album is Criminal Minded.
hmm,
People don't understand that KRS One on the first album
hmm,
is closer to Ice Cube than the Chuck D.
okay,
And Ice Cube has social commentary, but like KRS One is very much like Ice Cube is on Straight Outta Compton,
okay,
just just the East Coast version.
mm,
Um, Scott LaRock got murdered, and that obviously changed KRS One's life forever. That was his producer,
right,
best friend. Boogie Down Production was really, I believe, it's been told to me, more Scott LaRock's crew than even KRS's crew.
okay,
So KRS-One is carrying the mantle for his guy, but he's been murdered. And about him being murdered, the rhetoric starts to change.
hmm,
But both KRS-One and Ice Cube's change to becoming more socially commentating as artists about the things that are going on is a direct result of Chuck D in this album.
okay,
Like outside of Scott LaRock being shot, the KRS-One that you hear, the Ice Cube that you hear on America's Most Wanted, and you hear on Death Certificate, that's Chuck. Like that's how influential he is. He's influential to KRS-One and Ice Cube in terms of how they address social issues. Like Death Certificate for me, Ice Cube's second album, Death Certificate is a West Coast version of It Takes a Nation.
oh wow, okay,
It's the West Coast version of It Takes a Nation. But he went to New York and had been around them and spent time with Chuck. Like that's how important Chuck was. That's how important the movement was. And this is also a time too where I think, not to be funny, the black community, especially the New York black community, it really tapped into their blackness. There's a lot of 5%ers going around, a lot of Muslims, a lot of Malcolm X Farrakhan followers. So it's heavy and it's influential in the music and thereby in the culture. Chuck is one of our biggest cultural influences because he influenced so many of our great artists to, quite frankly, talk about better shit.
yeah,
Yeah,
do better, yeah,
yeah, it's a little do better to it as well. Um, the closest album that you could reference for its time to this, I believe, would be To Pimp a Butterfly.
okay,
But and I say this, I know I've had some hard takes on Kendrick. I say this respectfully. When I tell people that that album isn't sniffing It Takes a Nation of Millions, this is why.
it's not, and that's not disrespectful to him. It's just
It's
what
not like some of the commentary is there, and I love the commentary. But the difference between To Pimp a Butterfly and It Takes a Nation is it's like, no, that inspired a generation of MCs. That inspired this culture. And quite frankly, the Sonics are just better.
it has also inspired his contemporaries too, not just the next generation, but also the people who were in the same generation as him.
Yeah. So So yeah, it's super super important. Um, Here's how dope the album is. I really thought about changing my pick and going with an R&B album.
Hmm.
Bobby Brown's "Don't Be Cruel"
Hmm.
came here, which was a game changer,
Yeah.
and Sade's "Stronger Than Pride" came
Hmm.
out, which is a beautiful album.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Coop is a huge Sade fan. Like
Yeah,
that's
my
one of his
daughter, my
most
daughter,
very artists.
yeah, my daughter bears her name,
Yeah.
and I listened to both of those albums the other night, and I was like, man, love these guys. Not fucking with It Takes a Nation of
Yeah.
Millions.
And I had that conversation with myself, not with this year, but honestly, like I said at the very beginning of the show, none of, I mean, in my mind anyway, um, It Takes a Nation of Millions is clearly the winner of this. Like, it's not even particularly close, but like, it's, I had this debate with some other years in my head. Like I like this album better, but it's just not as like it was more important to me when I was that age, and it was I listened to this one more when I was, but it's not better. It's not, and I wish it kind of wish it was because I would really like to talk about, but it's not. It's not. So like,
I'll tell you what. I chose this album at the end of the day because it's like, and I want to learn. I want some of your perspective on the INXS album, and I feel like REM's Green came out this year, didn't it?
I think it was like late that year though. Like I think it was
Oh,
like no.
qualify.
Yeah.
Okay, copy that. It really is the best album that came out in 1988, and so I'm totally comfortable with saying that it was the album of the year and should have won the Grammy in 1989. And
Mm.
not just the rap Grammy, because obviously Will Smith and DJ Jazzy Jeff won rap's first Grammy. So
Yeah.
this was the first year that rap got nominated, and there was a rap category, which had
Right.
showed roads. Rap had only been around for, this is 88, so if we're going off birth date, this is 14, 15 years in.
Hmm. Okay.
So to achieve the point that a rap is getting nominated as a category is a big deal. This is the best album in 1998. I mean 1988 in
Yeah,
my.
I agree. There was nothing like I sent you a list like because I was thinking because I was you were helping me think through it, or I was like just typing it so I could think through it like out loud or whatever. Um, there are other ones like Sinead O'Connor's line in the Cobra, her first album, is considered to be a classic too. Um, Sonic Youth's Daydream Nation was this year, which is um, to me less good than it is important, right? Like Sonic Youth Daydream Nation is one of the crystallizing points for Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, and like it is one of the peak points of the Seattle. Like it starts moving in
Oh,
that with that one.
they're
Um,
trend.
yeah, it was like the initial moment, and of course the one that actually won this year is George Michael's Faith. Um, which has some huge records on it. Um, but to me, the it tailed off at the end a little bit. Like the first half of it was great, and the second half of it was kind of the same note over and a little bit.
I didn't. I hadn't gone back and listened to it from beginning to end in a long time, but
Yeah,
I thought that was a very astute observation by you. The second half of the album is nowhere near as good as the first, and it does have kind of like a one tune, one chordish kind of feel,
yeah,
where it's like, okay, everything sounds a little bit on the repetitive side.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like the first half sounds more original to him, and the second half sounds a little bit like he's trying to do Michael Jackson and not quite getting there. Like he's trying. Like it's which is in 1988 or 89 or whenever it was is what you who you want to try to emulate. But still,
and
it's he
and,
didn't quite.
and there's like a little a little Euro invasion going on with U2 winning one year and then George Michael winning the next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
These are, I mean, one is from England, one is from Ireland, you
yeah,
know. And so there's definitely, it's kind of funny. A UK artist is considered to be great in the UK it's almost like the transition over here is always flawless and seamless. Like
Mm,
from U2 and George Michael up to Amy Winehouse.
yeah,
Where in Adele from?
yeah. Adele's from London, yeah.
Yeah, it's always an easy transition. And I say this about our music here, black and white, or in between, or whatever. The transition for us to go over there is so much fucking harder than it is for them to come over here.
Wasn't Public Enemy bigger in Europe for a while too? Am I making that up, or is that
Tour wise, for sure, because you can go there. I mean, I've said this before. My travels have just taught me that the the white man in America, not you, of course,
you,
but
you
just
mean like the white man, like a big thing, not like
yeah,
yeah,
not person to person,
right,
is just systemically and institutionally more likely to shut things down and prevent a black man and a black group from Public Enemy from
yeah,
making their money in certain areas and venues where you can just go overseas and make that money.
right,
It's not always about the commentary. Sometimes it's just an institutional and systemic thing. The Roots were bigger overseas,
yeah,
in my opinion, than they were in the States until they made You Got Me with Erica Badu. And that was album number 4.
right, yeah. I was thinking for, and I
Yeah.
mean, Nation of Millions has like a British guy like doing the opening, like "Welcome to the blah blah blah." I don't remember what exactly he says, but like you know, hi, this is introducing Public Enemy or whatever it is. That's definitely a British voice.
And
Um,
and also too, like they made music to party to. Like this is
yeah,
still party music.
yes, it is.
And
Yes,
the Euros know how to throw down, man. Like the European clubs that I've had the fortune of like
dance,
going,
right?
it's different. And when I mean it's different, I mean different as in better.
Yeah.
Like go party for a night in a Euro club is like, how about this? The last time that like I went like clubbing,
Mm,
I think I was in Italy, and it made me stop clubbing in the United States for a long time.
mm,
Like I didn't step foot in the club for like a long time because I was like, what for? They don't know how to party here. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like they're really about partying and having fun and dancing and meeting people. There's no it's not confrontational. It's
Right.
not problematic. It's not overdone. It's about the time. And it's one of those things that like
Celebration. Yeah.
the energy permeates the room, and that's what I'm saying. So Public Enemy probably fared well in the time in that setting more than in your traditional settings here because it's like, well, and here's like, how about this? It's inspired by Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On," but the people that listen to "What's Going On" still weren't totally into hip hop.
Right.
Like this is 1988, so they're still into Stevie and
Hmm.
Marvin and Al Green and the OJ's.
Yeah.
You know, they're still on that wave, and so this album is in a funky place, even in the black community, where even the black community didn't party to it like they should.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are my thoughts. Still a top 5 rap album for me.
No, it's like I feel like we should touch on INXS a little bit, but like
Yeah,
in
let's
my
do.
head, X Nation is clearly the superior album in this year. Like
Yeah,
it.
I think the albums that I prefer to It Takes a Nation have to do when I was raised in just my age because
Yeah.
every time I listen to It Takes a Nation, I'm like, yeah, I see why people feel like it's the best rap album ever. I was just raised in a different era, so my
Right.
top are like, how about this? I still think, for me personally, Illmatic and Only Built for Cuban Links are my favorite rap albums ever,
Hmm.
and that would be my one and my two. But those albums also came out in 1994 and 1995 when I was 13 and 14 years
Right.
old.
Which
It
is
takes,
right in the center of yeah.
right. It Takes a Nation came out when I was 7 going on 8.
Right.
And so it is different. But I would tell you that like those two albums, Purple Tape, Illmatic, Doggy Style, Paid in Full by Eric B. and Rakim, which came out a year before this. And this album will probably be my top 5 rap albums of all time. And the older I get, like I used to have It Takes a Nation of Millions, like somewhere around 7 or 8.
Hmm.
The older I get, the more important it becomes. And the higher up my list it goes. And I'm comfortable telling you that I think If you think it's the best rap album ever, you're probably right. On my personal list, I'd put it at number three right now because both it and Doggy Style is party music from beginning to end, and I love some Doggy Style. But this is party music with a message, and
Yeah.
that
That's so
trumps
hard to do.
that trumps gin and juice, and it ain't no fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah. As much as we love gin and juice. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's still up there. Like how about this? When most people are making their top 5 to 10 like albums, it usually comes from a certain time in their life and not a time before. It usually comes from that time somewhere between 10 to 20. I think is like just a wide enough scope. This album got made when I was 8, and I have it at number three.
Yeah.
So the value and the staying power of it is about as high as it gets.
Right. Yeah. And you're on, not to get too far afield, but you're on Lupe's ass all the time, just for example, about having lyrics and stuff with that, or without being entertaining as well, right? And this shows how to do both. Because I mean, we haven't dug into the lyricism of this at all. I mean, the lyrics that Chuck D are exceptional too.
No, he's one of those guys that sometimes he gets forgotten.
Hmm.
He's still one of the 20 greatest MCs who ever lived.
Yeah.
And most of the evidence is right here on this album.
Yep. Just
Yeah.
if somebody wonders about it, like you can, it's easy to send them back to this and be like,
Yeah.
look, look, look.
Like, I don't know
Listen,
who Chuck D is. It's like, take 20 minutes of your day. Just listen to the first 2, 3 songs.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Even if you didn't know before, again, it had been a long time since I'd listened to Public Enemy, like seriously, and it was a good reminder of who he is
Mm-hmm.
and how important he is for sure.
KRS-One, Tupac, and Ice Cube are all inspired by this man.
Hmm.
Think about that.
And you also think about the genealogy after that too, like you could trace maybe not every single MC that came after them to one of those four, but the vast majority of them you could trace back to those.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and that's kind of what we talk about with in the rock world, like the Beatles and the Stones and Nirvana. Like they're like the inflection points that everything that comes after them is pulling from them, right? I mean, and this album, It Takes an Nation, seems to be one of those inflection
Yeah.
points that everything that comes after is pulling from
Yes.
that.
Everything with the social hip hop commentary is pulled from this album, like all the way up to Pimp a Butterfly. I don't think To Pimp a Butterfly was the last rap album that I heard that I thought was great, that had high marks on social commentary. It's something that it's been a dearth of it lately.
Yeah.
Um, but you can literally go to every album of its kind that has like a deep social commentary in rap, and you can go back to this record.
Yeah.
And that's why this record is also holding up so well.
Yeah.
Nobody's done it better since.
It's It's not only that though. Is nobody has done it better since that I know of anyway. I mean, I'm obviously less educated on that than you are, but also the things that he's talking about are also still relevant now too.
Mhm.
Like many of the things that he's discussing are still happening as well.
Yes, voting issues, drug issues, systemic and institutional racism, lack of education in communities, dilapidated neighborhoods where you
Mm.
don't have access to the best food, you have access to liquor and candy.
Right.
Yeah, he's talking about all these things in 1988. Yeah, like all of them. Like it runs the gamut of the social issues and the political issues that we face in this nation. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And there's just enough vitriol to it that it really did create a movement. Because I do believe that you need passion to create a movement. You
Yeah.
know, I feel like, how about this? I feel like this album helped inspire Spike Lee to make Malcolm X.
Oh wow.
You know what I mean? It's one of those type of albums where, like, culturally, it sparked something in our minds. Like the whole, like, I don't know if you remember this, like, there was like very much like a time in rap and in black culture where it was very like pro-black. People were wearing the chain, the black ropes with Africa with green
Yeah.
and black, um, and certain types of hats, and like all. This is what started all of that.
Wow. Okay.
You weren't seeing that before this album. Like this album did start like the black empowerment movement in the hip hop community that you saw people wearing the afro pick with the fist and all that. This album started all of that.
Wow. Yeah. So it
Yeah.
really does. There's so much in hip hop history and in popular culture history too that is can be
Yeah.
traced here.
Yes. Yes. Like
So he's
in,
taking, and that's a thing that is really super special about this record is he's taking the Garveys and the Malcolm X's and whatever, and he's not making it palatable, but he is delivering the message in a way that a younger generation can hear it and understand it,
yeah.
which is super important.
And he and he talks from the perspective of somebody like there's a lot of he talks like he really feels
Hmm.
that he's treated like three-fifths of a person in this nation.
Yeah.
He talks that way on this album. And so it touches something in you as a black person too, to hear this man like talk this way. Like, because you hear that he's so intelligent, that
Yeah.
he's powerful, he's so well read and well spoken. But he's like, but I ain't got no fucking rights.
And I could. Yeah.
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 So we can talk about INXS too. I wanted to kind of like, because I'd never heard of INXS,
Hmm. Did you
really.
recognize any of the songs?
Huh?
Did you recognize any of it?
I did recognize two of the songs.
Yeah. There are two incandescent hits on this album, and there's other ones that are good too. My note that I wrote on here, um, as like an opening, and one of the many reasons I picked this is a little bit for you because this is if the Rolling Stones were still at their peak in 1988 or 89, this is the album they would have made. I mean, this is a
Oh,
very Stones
okay.
feeling album to me. And
I,
Michael Hutchence, the lead singer who OD'd later, but like. Um, it was every bit for his generation that kind of sex symbol like Mick Jagger and dancer, and he had that kind of performance swag. I mean, he was you could hear that in the song.
New Sensation definitely gave me Stones vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, okay, so that makes sense to me. And also too, it's kind of funny just for me doing my research on
Hmm.
your side. I'm learning that this is around the time period that the years running up into this time is like the Rolling Stones are getting replaced as the greatest band in the world.
Yeah, and
And this
they had a long run.
right. And I didn't, just for me not being familiar, it's like, damn, I didn't know that they were the considered to be the greatest rock and roll group for as long as they were. It's pretty much from the moment that the Beatles disbanded up until like 85, 86.
Yeah, yeah. Some
Right,
girls generally like spoken of, or fuck, what's the name of the other one? I forget now. Like the ones in the early '80s, or the ones where they're still at their like like at their peak, really, at
right.
that all the way through the '70s. Um,
Yeah. So we're talking like from mid to late 60s all the way to mid 80s damn near. They're like that. And then I guess, like stylistically, I see I see the trend. I see what you're trying to say about like the sign of the times with the commentary.
hmm,
I just didn't feel like some of this stuff was as catchy, but I could see why it would be catchy in your world.
yeah,
It,
it's not the commentary part, like the social commentary connects with Public Enemy's album. Like I think this is one of the groups that Prince was doing on Sign of the Times was doing the anything you can do, I can do better for. Like because their first album, I think, or the one before this was 1985, which would have been as he was composing a lot of that stuff, probably. And um he's like, I can do this. And so I mean the feel of it, I mean, it's not as funky, obviously, but because it's not Prince, but it is in kind of that lane or trying to be in that lane. Um, but yeah, I Need You Tonight and Never Tear Us Apart are the two that are the like ones you still hear in, like you said, with Public Enemies, you still hear them in movies, you still hear them on the radio, you still hear them everywhere.
Yes,
Uh,
Need You Tonight for sure.
yeah,
Songs everywhere still.
it is. Um, and so thinking about it also has in some places the same kind of feel as George Michael's album too. Like the synths and the guitars and that kind of thing. But and it is dance music as well. Honestly, I mean, it's meant for that purpose. Um, the reasons that I think this is a better record to me, anyway, than George Michael's are that I don't say it's shorter. It is shorter, but like it's more direct. Like, and it doesn't have the same kind of fluff that the second half of Faith does. Um, and I think it's stronger beginning to end. Like I think it's as a whole piece of work, but again, that's if you wanted to argue that George Michael's album was better, I'm not going to fight with you, or by you I mean the audience, you about that. Like that's a personal preference thing, but
I think the music is inherently better. I don't think the songs are as big
yeah,
outside of Never Tear Us Apart. That's the only record that probably competes like big
on the
wide
yeah,
with big records on Faith.
hmm
But musically it's superior because it doesn't have the back half of Faith is solid,
yeah,
but it's album of the year contender. The musicality on this album,
yeah.
yes, it,
I,
it trumps it, and so does the commentary. And so this is one of those things I feel like where, it, and this is to make a fair point. A lot of the times it feels like the Grammys is more driven by the numbers.
yeah,
Who had more number one songs? Who's moved more units?
yeah,
Now, I did do some research and find out that the INXS says this album moved 6 million units.
yeah. It's a huge thing,
So it's not like it was a little thing. You know what I'm saying? But that also made me wonder how much did Faith sell?
more than that. I don't know that. I'm saying that off the cuff, but like, I can look. Hold on.
Yeah, I'm looking too
I would imagine it's more.
because when I saw the INXS sold 6 million records, I was like, it's like shit, that's a lot. Like people understand that's a lot.
Yeah, it says has sold over 25 million worldwide. Yeah, so it's
And so that would you know,
yeah,
that would go into the credence for people that have told me, well, Coop, it's not just a black white thing, it's a numbers thing.
hmm
This would be it because NXS made the superior album, in my opinion.
yeah.
Never heard this album before, by the way. I
It's
never heard.
really good. It's been forever since I've listened to the whole thing. Yeah,
It's a really good album. I enjoyed the project. I didn't know they were from Australia.
yeah,
You know, um, sometimes when you're listening to an Aussie band, you do feel like you're listening to a UK band.
hmm
But they made the better music. They made the better songwriting. They just didn't write the bigger songs or sell as many records.
yeah,
So it would appear that some of this institutional problem that we're talking about is numbers driven, not just color driven.
yeah. George Michael's also comes from. He was in Wham before that, which is one of the biggest boy bands that ever existed in
Yeah,
the like
they,
it was New Edition, it was Boys to Men, it was
I
Backstreet Boys. It was all of those things.
was about to say they very much remind me of or they're what NSYNC was
Mhm.
before NSYNC.
Yeah,
Wham was. Yeah.
and
And they did.
so
That's
they
wake me up, right? That's wake me up, right? Wake me up before you go. That's
yeah,
Wham, right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's pretty fucking big.
yeah. It's huge. It was huge stuff. And he had the sex symbol thing. I mean, just like Justin Timberlake. I mean, it follows that, and he's the Justin Timberlake is the modern iteration of George Michael. Like he's the guy who came from a huge boy band and had another solo career that didn't necessarily eclipse the original, but was worth of the conversation along with it. Unless you're talking about Michael Jackson coming from the Jackson Five, that's a whole different thing. But that's a whole different stratosphere.
I'm
But
about to say whole nother level.
um, Yeah. So the story, as a frame of reference, there's two things that I wanted to like get at. Um, I listened to because Tracy Chapman's first album was this year too,
Right.
um, and so I listened to some of that this morning because I hadn't listened to the whole thing ever. I mean, I know the Fast Car song obviously, but um, the cynical version of this show to do it for views would be to say Tracy Chapman's was the best from that year or the best from this side from that year because she just had a big Grammy moment now with Luke Combs and so forth. And that performance was extraordinary and I love that song. But well, if you're asking me like personally right now as a 40 whatever year old man, almost 43-year-old person, which one I'd rather listen to like in my spare time, I'd probably rather listen to Tracy Chapman. It's just because it's calmer, it's more serene, it's more peaceful for my state of mind. But that's an example of an album that has one incandescent hit and the rest of it is solid, right? And I can't in good conscience say that album from beginning to end is better than this. I just can't do it. Like
Right.
it's just not intellectually honest, right? And the other thing is that um, to give people who have never heard INXS, because and if you have never heard INXS or knew you were listening to INXS, I would imagine that a lot of the people listening to the channel wouldn't have listened to it either. Um, John Stewart, when he inducted Bruce Springsteen into, I think he was doing a Kennedy Center honors speech. Um, for like introducing him. He's like, I just know how Springsteen's music affected me. Um, like for me, it's for Stewart. He said that it was like Bob Dylan and James Brown had a baby and abandoned him at exit 8A on the Jersey Turnpike, right? And the kid grew up like that. So it's those that blending of those two kind of things um, was what Springsteen was to him anyway. Um, in excess, if you're taking two, you take the Stones and you take Prince and you put them together, and I don't think they're as good as either of them individually, but like it's those two styles. If you have those two styles together,
Side mesh. I can see
that's
that.
kind of where you're looking at.
I can see the Prince side because they're musicians and they're
Yeah,
really good.
yeah, they are.
They're really, really good musicians. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. It's like the music stuck out to me more than the commentary, and the commentary is pretty strong because it's rare that I hear. How about this? I am pretty well versed now from having done this with you.
Mhm.
That I was so impressed by the music that I was surprised I hadn't really heard them before. I was like,
Yeah,
damn, I
they're
was,
one that kind of got lost.
yeah.
That
I feel like they got. I was gonna ask you that. They feel like they got lost in the shuffle because they're super fucking talented.
yeah, and I mean, what happened to them is they got they weren't part of the original wave of hard rock people. They weren't part of the Van Halen, Def Leppard, and I mean they weren't part of that. And that they're stylistically not exactly like that either. Um, and so they're coming up like this is probably their apex, honestly. But this is also right before you hit Nirvana, Pearl Jam, LA, and all of that is a whole different thing in a different direction. So they got not lost in that. And then Michael Hutchence died too. I don't remember what year, like around not terribly long after this. I'm gonna look it up.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he OD'd, and he may have been one of the other 27 people. I don't remember. 1960 to 19. He was 37. Um, he died in 1997, so it was much later than this. Actually, I was wrong about that, um, but yeah, he was an addict, and he had a lot of personal issues too. But um,
Seems to be a theme in music.
yeah, it's it, and he was. I don't know if you've looked at pictures of him. He was every bit the sex symbol as George Michael and those guys. Like he was, there were people chasing him in the same kind of way that they were chasing those other guys. So that's a lot to deal with, I'm sure.
No,
But
I've never seen a picture of him. I'm just finding out about like this group.
yeah,
Like, and it's crazy because it's like I know the name, I've seen it before, never listened to the music.
yeah. And this is one of the great parts about this show too, that I enjoy about this is like I knew Slick Rick's name before we did the show, but I had not really paid attention to the songs. I know EPMD's name, but I have not really listened to the songs. I mean, I knew KRS One from REM, but like I didn't listen
Oh,
to.
right.
Like, there's tons of these people's names that I know that I recognize as hip rappers or hip hop groups or whatever. That when you actually like dig into what they actually did, and you're like, oh, this is why they were famous. Okay, yeah, they have serious skills. Yeah. Um,
Andrew, he didn't OD though. I just looked up. He hung himself.
oh, he did. Okay. I knew it was a tragic end for sure, but like, yeah,
I hate seeing people go like that.
I know. Me too. It's and you hear his voice too. Like he's a special talent too. He was
Yeah.
like a very gifted performer and vocalist.
Yeah.
Uh,
You could tell like he vocally trained.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. He was vocally trained. Like could sing like behind an orchestra trained.
Yeah, it's one of those magical things that I listen to him sing, and I'm like, "Oh, he's really good," but, like and I try to sing along to it, and you're like, "Oh, he's really, really good," because, like, I can sing a little bit, not nearly like that, but, like, a little bit, and I've trained some a little bit, and this is hard to sing. It's a lot harder to do than it sounds like it should be, I guess, is what it is, which is one of those things we talk about making the difficult sound simple or sound easy. Um,
Yes.
so it's they're a special group, but like I have like some of these will be an actual debate. I think some of these shows, but this one's not. I think Public Enemies is pretty clearly the superior album. It's pretty clearly the more important of the two. It's like
It really
historically
it
it is.
is really the best album that year.
It is like legit, and that's not me just being
Like
whatever.
how
It
like
legit.
like so and not like I'm trying to like convince you, but it has about 5 or 6 songs on there
Mhm.
that's as high as that you could want in terms of like classic nature for a genre of songs. But the other 10 songs on the album are really fucking
They're still
good.
good. Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, that's 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 not just album. How about this? It's very much Joshua Tree like in the sense that the way that it plays
Yeah.
is pretty damn flawless.
It
And
builds.
you have the high moments, but even the stuff that's not the high moments is great and
Hmm.
it's placed properly within the framework of the album.
Yeah.
It's not just it's I tell people it's not just putting together a bunch of songs, you
Yeah.
know. It's the way that the songs flow. There are very few albums that I could like. That is why I hold Sign of the Times so high, is because it's like,
Mhm.
man, he could have put these songs any fucking way, they'd sound good. But albums have a feel to it and they have like a story that they tell, and the way the story unfolds on It Takes a Nation of Millions, all the way down to the Beastie Boys kind of take. It's almost like we're gonna flip the Beastie Boys white party anthem music and turn it into our black party anthem music, with
Yeah.
with essentially like the same kind of in-house group of producers and team and
Right.
people. Like,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Like they
Mhm.
knew MCA and Mike B. Like you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
just looked to this is a sidebar, but Chuck D and Michael Hutchence were born 6 months apart. Um, so they're the same age too, which makes sense because we're talking about albums in the same year. So
yeah,
an interesting
yeah.
aside.
All people. Well, I'm about to say 1960. That's Bono too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, all these guys are making their best stuff around the same time. Because they're the same age. This is usually your musical peak and zenith. You know what I'm saying?
In like late 20s, yeah, for
Yeah,
them.
mid to late 20s. Yeah, that's usually the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially on the songwriting side.
Right.
Mid 20s appear to be like just in music in general. Like one thing that I've noticed since we've done this show is that most people do their best songwriting stuff somewhere between 25 to 30.
Right.
Yeah, there's something about that time.
Yeah.
Even if
Yeah. and experience both. Like it's
Yeah, Purple Rain and Sign of the Times.
yeah,
That's him, what he Prince is born in '58, so
same ish time. Yeah.
same-ish time. Yeah.
So
Uh,
yeah, I like our list. If we say that Joshua Tree and Sign of the Times were tied for
yeah,
88 and It Takes a Nation of Millions, I think those are both like both of those choices so far are
yeah.
legitimate records of the year.
I'm gonna love to see the list when we're done about like the original winner and then how we like did it. But
Yeah.
yes, Sign of the Times and Joshua Tree are a tie because they're just masterful. Like it's hard to pick. Like you know what I mean? Like
You-
it's like when you told me you prefer Joshua Tree. It's like yeah, I
I-
get that.
sure.
Yeah, but for me, it takes a nation of millions, and I'm glad you agree because I do feel like that. I think one of the things where rap has been held back and
Mhm.
systemically oppressed is that well, our best rap albums have never even been fucking nominated for album of the year.
Right.
You know, that's my thing. It's like I don't know what 1992 is, but for my side, 1992 is all about the Chronic.
Right. That's going to be an interesting conversation because 1992 in the alternative rock world, like that year, like so 1991 really, um, is like 1988 is in the hip hop world. That's Nirvana's Nevermind. That's Pearl Jam's 10. That's REM's Out of Time, which is the record with Losing My Religion, and KRS. It is I don't think Super Unknown, Soundgarden Super Unknown was that year. That was a little bit later. Um, what else was that year? There's more. Chili Peppers Blood Sugar Sex Magic was that year. Um, like
That's that's an
and
album of the year list right there.
it is like, and I don't think any Nevermind might have been nominated for album of the year, but I don't think any of the others were.
You
Um,
know what's crazy is that I'm familiar with all of those albums. That's how much like a few
yeah,
years changes things when you go from 8 to 11.
yeah.
I know every last album that you're talking about because I didn't even. How about this? I thought REM was a '90s group.
Hmm. Most people did of our age generation. Yeah, their first album was 1980, 81. Yeah.
That's
Uh,
wild. When you told me that, I was like, "What
yeah.
the
And
fuck?"
we will when we get to we'll talk. I want to talk off camera about how to set this up because there were. I won't. Let me actually ask you your opinion about this right now. Um, there were two albums that would have been for the 1994 year. One was August 93 and one was October 92. Um, I would really prefer to talk about both of them because I think 1993 was a really shit year. Like it didn't have anything else that I really want to talk about. Um, to move the October one, that was like it was October 6th. It was like 3 days or 6 days after the cutoff. Um, we will get to REM though, is my point. But um, because I think Automatic for the People, which is the one with Everybody Hurts and Man on the Moon and those records, I think that's the biggest album from this side, regardless of whatever. But it also came out the same. It would be the same as Counting Crows, August and everything after too. That would have been in the same cycle.
I remember that Counting Crows album.
It's very good. We talked about that one too. We haven't really talked about Automatic for the People. Um, so
I'm gonna have to do an REM dig.
yeah, it's worth the really short version. This is not why we're here, but we're here to talk about music, so there it is anyway. Your guys who are still here hanging out with us are getting like the full force of our. This is normally how our conversations go. We go on side through things, but um, their major label release was Green. When they got onto Warner Brothers, and that was 80 like late 80s, and it was much more poppy sounding album, but they had a whole IRS. What's the name of the record label? Murmur, Reckoning. There were let's see, Murmur, Reckoning, Fables of the Reconstruction, Life's Rich Pageant. There were five before that, before Green, um, and they were like a college rock darling radio kind of band, um, really until Losing My Religion was what popped them into the stratosphere, and that's 1991. But
Took 10 years.
it's End of the World as We Know It, and The One I Love, and Fall On. They had tons of
The One I Love.
Yeah,
That's the first record of theirs I'm familiar with. And
yeah,
what's that? Like 87 ish?
yeah, yeah. 87, maybe
Yeah,
late, but yeah, that kind of era.
I
Yeah.
remember that record. Yeah. See,
So,
that's one of those things. It's like when you started listening off those songs, it's like I knew all those songs, didn't know it was REM,
hmm yeah.
but I knew those songs.
We have not dug into. I mean, we've talked about REM in a couple episodes too, but not in the way like REM. Like for those of you who don't know, REM is my favorite band of all time. Like Coop talks about Nas and like he talks about Outkast and stuff like that. REM is that for me. Like that's that group for me. And
Yeah, we got to dig on them more.
so there's a lot to it, and there are basically three different generations. There's the pre Warner pre signing to the major label, so like through the '80s basically, and then from Green really to 1996 or seven, which is when Bill Berry, the drummer, left the band. He just didn't want to do it anymore. It wasn't like nobody's mad at anybody. It was just like I don't want to do this. So he left in 1997, and the albums that came after that are all um, much different tonally, um,
Okay.
because they wanted to make the first album they made after Bill Berry left really didn't have any drum on it at all much. Like it was, I mean, Drum Machine loops some, but like it wasn't. It was very sonically different. So
Okay.
um, that 90 the Monster tour, which was 95, 96. Um, three of the four members had like severe medical emergencies during the tour, like hernias, like slip discs. Bill Berry had a brain aneurysm, like on stage, um, and should not have survived. They were in Zurich at the time, which is where the best brain surgeons in the world live.
Yeah.
So he, they were lucky in that sense. But three of the four of them had like serious and Bill after that was just like, I don't want to break the band up. I want you guys to keep going, but like I don't want to do this anymore. And again, not in a mad way, just like this is not what I want to do now.
Life.
Yeah. So anyway,
Uh,
that was a left turn from talking about INXS and Public
uh,
Enemy.
it's cool.
Our
What are
conversation.
what are your early thoughts? What are we doing? This is 89 we just covered, so now we're tonight.
90.
What are
Um,
your early thoughts?
the two that are in competition in my brain for I forget, was that the year that Bonnie Raitt won? I can't remember. I don't remember what actually won in 1990. The two that are in conversation are Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever, which is the album with Free Fallin' and I Won't Back Down and Running Down a Dream,
I
uh,
remember that.
and The Cure's Disintegration, um, which is it's I think of them like this. Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever. I went back and looked at the track list. It's one of those records that has like three or four like huge, huge, huge songs, and the rest of it is solid but not like magical to me. It's also the apotheosis. It's like the best possible like country rock and roll album. But it's also like the apex of that, and it's one of the last ones that was really done in that style. Um, and it was extraordinary, but it's the last one. The Cure's album started something new, right? And we haven't talked about the Cure at all. So I'm kind of leaning in that way. Um, if I'm like, if you're asking me which of the two I think you would like better, I think you would like Tom Petty's better. But
I'm familiar with that record
yeah,
already.
the Cure's Disintegration is it's one of those albums. I listened to 106.5 The End in Charlotte a lot when I was in high school because I didn't have a CD player in my car because I had a very old car. So those songs would have been released in 1989. They were still playing them in high school on the radio on like new alternative rock stations. So I think it started a lot of things. I think there's tons of bands that come after that are pulling from it too. So I'm gonna have to think about it a little bit more, but I'm leaning towards the Cure for that one.
I'm fascinated on what's going on my side as I do a quick dig.
Hmm
On the R&B side, I would have to tell you my early pick if I'm picking one that I'm probably would fight for. Mariah Carey's first album came out in 1990,
Yeah, Mariah
which
was a huge, huge deal, man. Like,
which I think is still arguably her best album.
you think so?
Yeah, her first album is phenomenal, and I mean, I remember 9, 10 year old me had a big crush on 19-year-old Mariah Carey, big crush.
That's not an unreasonable position.
Um,
19 year
on
old Carrie was beautiful.
Stunning.
Yeah.
Uh, on the hip hop side, "Fear of a Black Planet" by Public Enemy,
Hmm.
and "America's Most Wanted" by Ice Cube, and "Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em" by Eric B. and Rakim
Yeah.
are the three rap albums that are coming to mind right now. So my early thoughts would probably be, if I was picking two, might be I need to go listen to "America's Most Wanted" by Ice Cube again. By most rap metrics, that was considered to be their best rap album that year, even
Okay.
over "Fear of the Black Planet" and "Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em." And Cool G Rap's "Wanted Dead or Alive." There's a lot of good stuff. And Tribe's first album will be 90 as well. People's
Wow.
Instinct that had Bonita Applebum and Can I Kick It
Hmm.
and all that. But I would tell you right now, I might, if I was picking right now, I'd probably have to lean on Mariah's first album, because it has some of everything on there.
Might be the
So
biggest. Like,
yeah, so I'll tell you, like right now, early would be actually like, I mean, this is a big juxtaposition: Mariah Carey and Ice Cube.
yeah, and the Cure too, which is like goth.
Yeah,
uh,
so that'll be interesting. I'm actually gonna have to do some listening to some of these albums again.
yeah.
90
That's
was one
the
of
part
those years.
about project for me is going back and listen to stuff I haven't listened to in 20 years.
Yeah,
I
90
know
was a,
the thing.
90 was an interesting year because it's like I was into music, but I
Mhm.
was mostly into the music that my cousins had access to. I
Right.
still had kind of like ventured off onto my own yet.
I,
Yeah, Mama Said Knock You Out by LL Cool J is 1990. I
mm,
don't think it's better than any of the albums that I listed though, but I believe it did win best rap
oh,
album for.
that sounds right. I don't
Yeah,
know that.
and it's one of L's better albums. I just
Yeah.
don't think it's better than the album that I'm saying. And "Mama Said Knock You Out" is one of my. It's probably my favorite LL Cool J song and
Yeah.
one of my rap songs ever. Yeah,
Yeah.
the like that's one of those videos that stayed with me my entire life. You know
Mm,
what I'm saying? Because when he was like, "Don't call it a comeback," I was like, "You just made an album. What do you mean? What happened?" Like, wasn't I wasn't up on the fact that a lot of people thought LL Cool J had sold out and fallen off.
mhm.
These are things that I didn't find out until I started getting into hip hop around 94, 95, 96. And
Oh,
I'm like going back and doing the history. So, yeah. So, we should have some fun next week. I think we have some more fascinating choices to make next week. Like, there's not a It Takes a Nation, like, as great as all
right.
these albums are. Like, we did just discuss the album that, in my genre, on my side, is arguably the best piece of work that ever came out of this genre.
Right.
And no disrespect to NSX or George Michael, it's just
No,
clear to me.
no, that one's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
To me.
But
All right.
all right,
Cool.
I gotta go be an adult. I'm figuring you do too.
Yeah, I'm sure I do. They're not home yet, but they will be soon. So,
Yeah,
um, thanks y'all for hanging out with us. Like, subscribe, throw us some dollars, whatever you feel like you need to do. This is a fun thing for us to do, and this
yeah.
is honestly a thing that's very similar to what we would be doing on Saturdays. It would be a text conversation
It would be
instead,
a text conversation. Yeah,
but
it would be one of us like you'd be like, "Hey, you should really listen to this NXS album." It's like, have you ever listened to "It Takes a Nation of Millions" by Public Enemy?
yeah, we could
Yeah,
probably go back in our text threads and find that kind of thing. So.
yeah. I think we did have a Public Enemy conversation once a couple years ago where I was just texting you like who they were like really were to us. Like, yeah, I feel
Yeah,
like that
I
happened.
do remember that. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
around the time of the very first episode when we were getting it set up.
right, right.
So,
All right.
also, guys, if you are still here and still listening, our very first episode, you can go back on the Mirror Music channel. There's like a playlist thing on the page. That's our very very first episode. You can see me with more hair and so forth and so on, and
Me too.
a little less gray here.
Me too.
Um, it's 2.5 years ago ish about. Um, but our first episode, like I said earlier, was about Bob Dylan's "Blowing in the Wind" and Public Enemy's "Fight the Power." So, um, if you want to hear us run our mouths about Public Enemy more, um, that's a good place to go to. So,
Sounds good. I just got a text from my boss. The work begins
all right, take care, y'all. We'll see y'all later.
later.